We started Spinnaker probably about 6 years ago to replace another open source project called Asgard. And Asgard had a healthy community, and so we knew that if we were going to build something to replace Asgard, we had to bring that community along with us. So the first key thing is that Spinnaker is backwards, or at the time was backwards compatible with Asgard, because Asgard would push certain opinions upon your infrastructure. And if you pointed Spinnaker at it, it would recognize those opinions. And so that was one way to ensure the continuity of a community that was already using, let's say, open source from Netflix. I think the other thing that helped a lot in terms of building a strong community is that we partnered with a number of companies before open sourcing it, one of them being Google, but also Pivotal, Microsoft, and a couple of other companies like Target and Veritas. So we had not only Netflix, but some other really amazing companies that were adding features into Spinnaker so that once we open sourced it to the world, so to speak, out of the gate, Spinnaker worked with AWS, it worked with Microsoft Azure, and it worked with Google Cloud Platform. And so, and then embodied in Spinnaker were a number of opinions in terms of how to do, obviously continuous delivery, but the idea of pipelines with automated canary analysis, with deployment patterns like we call them red-black, but the rest of the world calls them blue-green. All those things embodied into a platform that could also call Jenkins jobs, be triggered off of Jenkins jobs, I think created this groundswell where the community could actually start leveraging this platform and then start giving back to it. And that innovation has just continued. And so that's why now we have, like you said, community members here tonight from over 22 different countries. In fact, a number of them are actually active committers in Spinnaker, which is just super exciting. Community for me is innovation. So there's obviously a community within Netflix, but I think a broader open source community, what it really equals for all of us is innovation. And a healthy community is an engaged community that can obviously get questions answered and also answer those questions, but also can extend and build, let's say, things on top of Spinnaker. And that community actually doesn't even need to be solely open source. As I pointed out, there are plenty of commercial companies also building on top of Spinnaker. So community is this idea of different corporations and people adding value into this ecosystem, which equals innovation both for Netflix, but also for everyone in the community. And that innovation can take the form of new features, like I was elaborating in terms of, customized support in Kubernetes, but it could also take the form of like bug fixes or videos or documentation enhancements, and that creates this idea of like anyone in the community can get involved. We're trying to be very much inclusive, but at the end of the day, for me, community really is all about innovation, and the more healthy and engaged a community is, like the more everyone gets something out of it. Yeah, this community, from the standpoint of it's diverse and amazing, and there's so many different, let's say, corporations and domains represented within this community. And when I think about my career, one of the most exciting times previous to Netflix is when I had my own company. And I had a team of people, and we were consulting to a number of corporations across the globe, whether they be financial services, healthcare, independent software vendors. And what was fascinating and influential for me is that while each one of those companies or corporations had a different, let's say, business model, they all wanted the same thing. And the idea at the time, what we were espousing was like better software faster in terms of like testing. But it's all kind of manifested in this idea of continuous delivery in terms of any company out there, whether you're Netflix, Google, or a small startup, you have to move fast, because if you don't, you'll be beaten by someone who's faster than you. And there's another thing I'd like to add on that, is that this community also mirrors the notion of like always learning. This community is growing and trying new things, and is also not afraid to try something new. So like the whole idea of like the governance policy in Spinnaker, it's not like any of us had vast experience in terms of formalizing governance and figuring out how to do technical oversight committees and steering committees. We're all learning this together, and I think this is a learning community, and very much I think mirrors my career and anyone's career. If you want to be successful, or at least not stagnate, you have to continue learning. And I also believe every corporation out there who wants to move fast also has to recognize that they have to be a learning corporation, because they will be beat by some other corporation who learns faster than them. So I think it's all interrelated. I think there is a strong correlation with, let's say, peace of mind and ability to think clearly, with whether it be exercise, prayer, meditation, mindfulness, all these things, yoga, all those things I think are all interrelated or similar in the sense of it's me time or you time, whatever. It's time alone where you can start to think. It's the same as like taking a long shower and people are like, Eureka, I had this great idea in the shower. I think for me, racing is two things. One, it's the time just to think by myself, whether I'm on running or swimming or on a bike. I usually end up spending a lot of time thinking about like this, the community, Netflix, a lot about Netflix in terms of, where's my team going? Do I have the right team? Are we doing the right things? But I also think it's definitely a stress reliever. Regardless if, you work at Netflix or any company, there is a level of stress, especially, the technology challenges I think are easy. Because it's usually binary, like there's a problem, let's solve it. People problems or people challenges are a lot more difficult and nuanced. People aren't, on or off. And so I think that adds to, just stress in general. And so I feel strongly that anyone in a leadership position should have some sort of outlet, whether it be exercise or, prayer, meditation, all those things. I think you need that to both think, but also just like let the stress off. I hope this community continues to grow, and as I said earlier, community is innovation. So I would love to see continued innovation. That has been the eye-opener for me, both within Netflix, but also in the larger community, is that when you create a platform that people can innovate on, you learn so many interesting things. When we set out to build Spinnaker, we largely had blinders on in that we wanted to solve a very specific problem, and that was server-side AWS EC2 deployments. And even at Netflix, we saw innovations in terms of people using Spinnaker for feature flags or for firmware delivery or for even library management. And then you're seeing those innovations obviously in the open source world where they're doing amazing things with Kubernetes, adding all sorts of new features, many of which we're trying to use at Netflix and some of them we can't. But I think ultimately what I see for the future of Spinnaker is a very, very vibrant community that continues to innovate, try new things, is always learning, and is not afraid also to back out of something when we learn that this doesn't work. But I want to see and hope that the trajectory we're on continues, and I think it does from the standpoint of having an engaged community and a healthy community that can extend Spinnaker, can get involved easily with overall governance. And so all these things that we're putting effort into, I believe, will only continue to make this a more healthy community. Because it's the best. So there are certainly other alternatives to Spinnaker, and it's great in that Netflix does not have a horse in that race per se. Like, we don't get anything, let's say, commercially out of, let's say, a company choosing to use Spinnaker. What we do get though is innovation, so we want that. But there are a number of choices out there. I think with respect to Spinnaker, what makes it special is two primary things. One, not only is it a continuous delivery platform, but it also does the infrastructure management aspect. And I think a lot of the platforms out there today, they focus on, let's say, orchestrating delivery, but then there's the whole, once I've gotten something into production, which is very important and very nuanced in terms of all the validation you want to do before you get to production. But once it's there, what are you going to do with it? You have to maintain it, observe it, do all the things that are infrastructure management, and Spinnaker allows you to do that. So I think that's a really big value add that I think a number of people overlook. And I think the other thing is that Spinnaker embodies very strong opinions that work. And a classic one is a blue-green deployment, but there's Highlander. We have monitored deployments, so rolling red-black, or I guess what we'd say it would be called rolling blue-green deployments, which I don't even think the industry is really talking about. And so these are patterns that you get for free from Spinnaker, and you could of course implement these patterns on other platforms, but they would take a whole lot of effort, a whole lot of calls, and you get it for free with Spinnaker. And I think lastly, it goes back to basically everything I've been talking about with you, is the community and innovation. This is a really strong community. You have the actual cloud providers themselves adding features into Spinnaker like AWS and Microsoft and Google and Pivotal. They are adding native features, if you will, into Spinnaker to support their platforms, and that's pretty amazing if you think about it from a support standpoint. Like AWS added Lambda support into Spinnaker, and so not only you have someone like AWS in the ecosystem, but their developers know this system better than anyone else, and they can help in terms of maintaining the AWS cloud provider, but also answering questions and whatnot. So I think it's, again, there are other choices out there, and I think a lot of them are fabulous. And if, to your question, why Spinnaker, it's infrastructure management is something people overlook, just the innovation within the community, and then this embodiment of opinions. So there are probably a billion things that I wish I knew then, which I know now. I would say the one, and this was asked to me recently, is, and this is more of a, let's say from a Netflix standpoint, but saying no. I didn't say no enough, and that I think gets us all into trouble. I think if I had said no more often, let's say in the beginning, I think we may have been further along on a number of strategic efforts, because we went down paths that may or may not have been the most high leverage thing we could have been doing. But we've learned from that. So, and I think with respect to the community, probably even saying no is something certainly in the community, although I think engaging more, if I had done that more in the beginning, I think in retrospect, let's say me and my team's involvement in open source we've done a lot, but we could have done a lot more, and we're trying to do a lot more now because we didn't do a lot in the beginning. So be saying no and not underestimating the level of effort to create a vibrant community.